Please welcome now the Imus Morning Program. Carl, two questions, Jeffers. Good morning, Mr. Jeffers.
Good morning, Don. You look great this morning. That's
Thank
a great
you.
outfit. The color's just terrific.
Thank you very much, Carl.
Good.
Made me uncomfortable here. Well, as long as we're getting on, edging toward that, let's talk about gay marriage. Yeah. The president finally came around. What do you think?
Well, you know, I did, in fact, a piece in the Huffington Post just this past Friday, but I focused on the political side of it because it actually sort of puts Romney back in the race. For 4 months, Republicans have been ruining their campaign chances by being distracted by social issues. Now, the president gave them a social issue they could actually run on simply because of the clarity of the two opposing positions. The inside track is that there was absolute clearance for Joe Biden to go and meet the press and say what he says. So that was not a shock. What the White House was not counting on was the fact that the media took what Biden said and used it as a launching pad to essentially box President Obama into a corner where they just were not going to relent until he made some sort of public commitment statement one way or the other as to where he stood. That they were not counting on, and as a result, it forced the issue out. Two sides to that. On the Democratic side, the reality is that those who are strongly in favor of gay rights, same-sex marriage, are those who are some of the most disappointed of Barack Obama's 2008 supporters, to the extent that some of their checkbooks had started to close as well.
Yeah.
That's all changed. This will give them a motivation to get out to the polls. On the other hand, if we look at it, how does it work for Romney? Don, there have been 32 referendums throughout the United States of ballot initiatives to support same-sex marriage. Do you know how many of them have passed? 0. None of them have passed. So what we can look from at this point in terms of the judgments to make.
I thought these polls indicated that more people than not support gay marriage.
That's my next point.
Oh.
The national polls now show that the majority of Americans either fully support or are comfortable with same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
But what the statistic that I just cited shows is that the majority of Americans who actually go to the polls and vote are not in favor of same-sex marriage, and that is a plus for Mitt Romney to motivate those voters, because many of those voters have not been that comfortable with Mitt Romney because they did not think he was conservative enough. His taking a clear stance opposed to the president gives him an opportunity to rein in some of those voters. So on balance, both candidates get a benefit from that.
It's an unfortunate issue to make points on. I mean, I know I'm naive in saying that, but
yeah.
Well,
so was civil rights, but I mean, the reality is that everybody uses those issues politically, and generally speaking, it is only when the political drive has reached a point where action can actually be taken to begin with.
Well, it used to be against the laws, you know.
Yeah.
For black and white people to marry each other.
That's right. There were actually about 30 states, in fact, where up until about 10 years ago, that in fact it was against the law. And
that seems insane, doesn't it?
And well, it seems insane only in terms of the values that we exist with now. It doesn't seem insane in terms of where we came from, in terms of slavery and how that would have been a vestige of that kind of racism and slavery. You know, Don, that's an interesting point. Because one of the problems Republicans have, and that Romney has, Barack Obama has a 40-point lead among Hispanics. And one of the reasons is not even Mitt Romney's fault. The Hispanic Americans have associated the Republican Party with anti-immigration laws in Alabama and Arizona that seem to target them as a special group that the government or the state is taking action against. And you brought up the laws on race.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not in Arizona. I'm not Hispanic American. But as an African American, I can tell you that there were poll tax laws. There were laws that said, grandfather clauses, that in order to vote, your grandfather had to be a free man. Now, Don, you know, in 2012, most of us have that covered.
Yeah.
But if you passed that law in 1877, a lot of my folks have a lot of problems trying to get to the polls with that kind of a law.
Yeah.
So you can understand why Hispanic Americans feel so targeted by this kind of action on the part of Republicans, and that explains part of the president's 40-point lead.
It seemed to me the president was, maybe I'm nitpicking, but hedging his proclamation by saying that, well, it still should be left up to the individual states, which it probably should, I guess, but.
Well, they do that on both sides.
Yeah.
Dick Cheney, former vice president, who probably has more of a problem with it than Barack Obama, but also has a situation where his daughter had openly come out. His position was, look, I think that, we have to deal with this in an evolving society, but in reality, it should be left to the states. That's always the final exit strategy for anybody who's dealing with an issue like that, is to take your position either for it or against it, and then say, but it really ought to be left to the states, which sort of helps to mollify some of the opposition based on the constitutional perspective.
We're sort of talking with Carl Jeffers here on the Imus.
What do you mean sort of talking? You've asked me 4 or 5 questions already.
13 till the hour. Are you a sports fan at all? I might have asked you this.
Of course, I'm a big sports fan. That's one of the reasons that I got an hour's sleep last night. I watched the Lakers get thundered by the Thunder.
Are you a Laker fan?
Well, I'm a Laker fan. I'm a Miami Heat fan. I think it's time for LeBron to get his ring. I certainly honor the expertise and experience of San Antonio to still be in the playoffs. Yeah. So, yeah, sure, absolutely. Can't wait for the NFL season to start. I played tennis, and, we've got some big tournaments coming up, and golf. I mean, I'm a big fan of all of those sports. And I remember Warner Wolf 20 years ago in Washington when he used to say, let's go to the videotape, and I used to watch him regularly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He tried that in New York, too. Worked pretty well, didn't it, Warner?
Not bad.
Not bad. So. All right, Carl, nice to see you.
Well, it's good to be with you today.
Carl Jeffers here in the Imus Morning Program. It is 12 minutes till the hour. Buzz Bissinger, Lorraine and Chris Wallace, Paula Dean and Charles Rangel are all coming up.